Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the latest edition of JTWJE with Jacob Elyachar Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Elyachar, the chief content producer and writer at JTWJE.com, a pop culture entertainment news website. If you're watching this on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and please subscribe and consider watching more videos after this interview is done. If you're listening to this on our audio platforms, please give us a 5-star rating. And thank you so much for downloading more episodes on your various podcasting platforms. I am thrilled to welcome this multi-instrumentalist and composer and singer to this podcast. As of this recording, he has over 49,600 Instagram followers, and he performed at Gracie Mansion for then Mayor Michael Bloomberg and appeared on VH1's Big Morning Buzz. And this February 2024, he'll debut his solo EP, Afterall. So please help me welcome Ezra Grey to the podcast.
Hello, everybody. How we doing? Jacob, thank you for having me.
Ezra, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to talk with me today. I really appreciate it. All right, so let's get started. So when did you get interested in music, and how did that passion evolve and desire to pursue a career in the recording industry?
Yeah, so it began early and then stopped. So when I was 6, I got my first guitar, and I took lessons for a couple of months, but the teacher kind of was mailing it in, and so I wasn't really passionate about it at first. So I dropped it. I was originally a visual artist, and then it wasn't until I was 11 and I had moved to Florida, and I was sort of in like a different place, didn't have that many friends, and so I picked up guitar again when I got Nirvana's Greatest Hits album, and I started listening to that, and I really got inspired to pick up the guitar, and because of Kurt Cobain. And now he's not like known for being a great guitar player by any means, but he was really, really good at crafting amazing sound design for his guitar tone. He would have a great little pedal board setup, and he had such like a brutal, heavy guitar tone, as well as he was really good at crafting nice, clean tones as well with some chorus effects and things like that. And of course, we know he's a fantastic songwriter. So Kurt, along with Jimi Hendrix, who I was also getting exposed to at the time, who now different, of course, he was a virtuoso guitar player, but more importantly for guitar and for music in general, he was such a pioneer and innovator when it came to a new style of guitar technique, which people hadn't really seen before. He combined sort of jazz and blues and brought it into sort of like a rock, psychedelic rock songwriting. And the primary guitar technique that he really inspired or was, instrumental in bringing towards music in general was combining sort of having bass lines with chords and melodies at the same time. And it's something that so many guitarists took and used. So John Frusciante from Red Hot Chili Peppers and as well as John Mayer, probably the two most famous examples of a guitarist that really have a lot of that style of playing. And so that's how it started. I got, within the first year of when I was 11, started writing music using just sort of like a little DVD I got from Guitar Center with my $100 guitar. And first didn't have any vocals on it, but then eventually started, I didn't know how to sing, but I started writing some simple tunes. I still remember the very, very first song I wrote when I was 11. Only the chorus of it, though. It wasn't particularly good, but it wasn't all that bad. And then from then, I kind of knew that that's what I wanted to do. I always had that sort of childhood dream of like, I know I want to play music. I know I want to be a musician.
I gotta say that when you were talking about Jimi Hendrix and Kurt Cobain, my mind immediately go into that legendary for Kurt Cobain, this legendary Smell Like Teen Spirit, legendary riff, guitar riff, da 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 da. I don't want to do too much more, otherwise I'm going to get struck by YouTube. But however, and then also All Around the Rush Hour, Jimi Hendrix's version came in directly into my mind and just went bombastic. Those guys you're right. Those guys really upped up the guitar.
They did, yeah. It was he was just an innovator. Every once in a while you get a guitar innovator that changes the game in terms of how people approach the instrument. Eddie Van Halen with his tapping and everything. And more recently, there are some guys like Tosin Abasi, who is more of a niche musician because he plays a lot of like gent progressive metal, but he has some guitar techniques that like people haven't seen before. And so it's some of these innovators that stick in our mind As you know, some people will say like they're the best guitarist. Sometimes they're not necessarily the best, because how do you say one person's the best? But they change how we see music and the guitar.
And not to mention the fact that we were talking about, we're bringing up guitar because there's two different types with acoustic. I immediately go to Lindsey Buckingham. I've seen him live 3 times in my life. And I still remember him when he does go insane. And then in metal, when he switches up to like, I'm So Afraid. But then and then immediately Santana's Smooth comes into mind when he did that, comes to mind. And also Prince when he did Purple Rain. And not only that, I was watching something on X that week and they mentioned Prince is one of the greatest guitar solos of all time.
Absolutely. And guitarists like Prince and some of these other guitarists we're talking about, they have like and Santana, they have as well as the ones before, they have a very recognizable sound, you know, where it's like you hear it, you know immediately who it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're not here to talk about all guitarists, so we're here to talk about you. So you had the opportunity to tour with metal bands Garrick, Scenario, and Ethris. So what were some of the lessons that you learned that not only grow as a performer, but also finding your individual sound?
Sure. So at that point when I started touring, I had a lot of performance experience, you know, in more local shows and, you know, playing in all different types of scenarios for like over 10 years at that point. So I was very comfortable performing. So I as far as like performance, like being comfortable with audiences, it didn't change much. But what I really, really learned was like, what is it like being on the road? And how is it compared to like what pre-expectations you might have? And what you'll typically hear from artists that aren't major artists, but they're touring artists and they make a profit. They still have big followings. It's a lot less glamorous than it seems. It's maybe just those like superstar AAA tier artists that do have these like really glamorous experiences. On the Scenario tour in Europe, we were fortunate to be in like a pretty nice bus. But even that, you know, being like a supporting act, we were kind of the de facto roadies. And so like we'd get a very little sleep. We'd be the ones moving everyone's gear in and out. And then we'd have like a little bit of downtime, but then it was like hopping up to the next show. We're going from like, you know, Germany to Italy or whatever the case was. It's hard to remember exactly now. But aside from that, it's also like being ready to just play every night too. And having the energy for that on top of like little sleep and being tired from just moving all the gear and whatnot. But one of the best experiences I had on one of the tours that we did going from Texas to Florida, at first it seemed like a nightmare because our bus broke down in the middle of nowhere in Texas. We were very close. The closest little town was Kingsland, Texas, which was really small. It was a very small town, but the people in Kingsland were so nice. And they helped us. We were stuck there for 5 days and we were like, oh, this is terrible because we're going to miss some dates on the tour. But it ended up being like the best thing that happened on the tour because they helped us put together a fundraiser and they were really excited to have us there. And we made really good friends, some people that I'm still friends with. One of them came out to Jersey. He was visiting for some business. And I live in New York, but my friend and collaborator, Zachy, who produced the EP and all the songs that are also going to be the future releases. And so we had a great time with him. And, like I was saying, like performance experience is huge. And one thing that I'll say, and big artists will say this too, you still always get like a little bit of butterflies before you go on stage. It kind of never goes away. Even if you played for like thousands of people, I've had the opportunity to sometimes play for that many people. Sometimes it's a lot fewer. Sometimes it's like 15 people in a room. Sometimes it's 500. It still kind of doesn't go away, even if it's a small local show with just your friends. But like as soon as you get out on the stage, like the first song starts, it's like, okay, you feel like right at home. You feel like you're in your bedroom playing. So, I think just those things, performance experience, you get used to it. But having the experience of like knowing what the road is like, knowing what the challenges are, knowing that like things can arise, and being prepared. One last thing I'll say about that is it wasn't necessarily touring. It was kind of a local show that we played with the Theorists, but I had like a new pedal board set up and I had designed all my sounds on it and I had it ready, but I didn't realize how small and close together the buttons were on the pedal board. And so when I went to change some of the sounds for the solo, I hit the wrong button. And so, and I consistently did that because I had these big boots on. And so from that, I learned like, okay, I got to make sure that I actually test switching this as though I were playing it live.
Those are some incredible lessons. Like the first one to come back. Wow, you had to do not only were you supporting them, you're also also God, I can't remember the name. I'm so sorry. The bussy, like the support people, the roadies. Oh my God, roadies. Yeah, sorry, roadies. That's just like that's definitely humbling. I believe that you have to you're not just the supporting act, but you're also the roadies. That's very interesting mindset.
Yeah, I mean, well, roadies are like in general, roadies for especially for these big acts. Like I've only seen like a lot of like behind the scenes stuff for the giant ones. Like they're really MVPs because they work quick. And for the big stuff, there's a lot of them, but they have to work quick and they have a lot of responsibility. I've actually worked as a roadie on a number of things as well. And so I understand that experience, and it's a fair amount. It's a fair amount of work. You get sweaty quick, and it's a heck of a workout. As soon as I started working as a roadie for a while, like I dropped like 20 pounds and like without trying, you know what I'm saying? Like I was on a diet too, but it's like you leave the night and you're very tired and ready to sleep.
Oh yeah, and not to mention that, however, the Kingsland story in Texas definitely shows the power of the human spirit.
No doubt. And that left being the defining moment and defining memories of the tour. Like that was like the happiest time of the tour, even though we were in what would have been otherwise theoretically like a bad situation.
Oh yeah, absolutely about that. So now that you're in the music industry, what are some of the challenges they face staying in it, and how do you overcome those obstacles?
So I would say I'm still very much in the process of breaking into it. I've been lucky so far that we're gaining traction on the first single. Obviously, it's the first one, so it's hard to get a lot of people to stay for too long, because when you have like a catalog and there's more to see, people will stick around and listen more. But I would say one of the things I thought about more about this concept is like just adapting to how the industry has changed so much. Anyone that's involved in the music industry in whatever capacity, we know it has been turned upside down and sideways and 360 and 180 and all these different directions. As a 30-year-old currently, like I grew up at a time when the industry was like just exiting its like prior long-standing format of things where like, okay, you're an artist, you think like you just focus on being an artist, you get in a band, you get out there and play, try to land a record deal, try to get scouted. And while there was always huge gatekeeping with that, like at least you kind of knew how it worked, and you're like, okay, there's like a system in place for this, and maybe if you do things right and you hopefully put things out of quality, you have a chance of it. And I remember like when streaming like first became a thing and it was starting to take over and it looked like, it wasn't going back with it. My perception was not good. I was like, oh no, this is like doom and gloom for the future because with the streaming royalties. But in the last like 5 years, it shifted a lot, as I've seen a lot of people explaining, industry people explaining on it. But then my own experience, like the biggest shift is that the pool. One negative is that the pool is like really oversaturated because anyone can put music out, and with social media and how now we're like instant gratification, we're just like swiping all the time. It's hard to keep attention. But on the other hand, anyone has access to it. And if you're able to learn how to play your cards right and how to put it out and be patient with it, and you have an opportunity. So you can really DIY yourself. One downside is that you have to kind of wear like 20 hats at once now as an artist. But if you're able to have the resources to outsource it, certain aspects of it, certain aspects of things to different people, or be lucky enough to have some people who have done it themselves to varying degrees of success to get advice from, which I've been very lucky to. I've had a few friends that are established artists, independent artists that have been able to figure it out and do it themselves over several years that I've been able to get some really good advice from. So I'm trying to replicate that and then avoid certain mistakes that either they tell me about or that I've seen myself.
Those are all really good answers. I got to say that it's very interesting the way it leads, especially after COVID. I think COVID reset everything.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to say that it's very interesting, like the way that concerts are. Like I just been like this year alone, I only went to Bruce Springsteen and Ed Sheeran.
Mm-hmm.
this year. Like, and I go to concerts, but it's like now I'm like very picky and just very picky.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. All righty, so let's talk about. I gotta say, I love "Into the Sun." It was it was fabulous.
Thank
and
you.
I was re-listening to that song before we got on our call. So, can you please share the story behind "Into the Sun"?
Yeah, so it's kind of a different story. So I wrote this song when I was 15. It's the only song on this EP that isn't from the last like year and change, like year and a half. The rest of them were some of them were like last minute additions, and some of them were within the last year. But this one, it's not the first song I wrote, but it's the oldest one that I remember. That was like I felt like, okay, this is like at least a certain quality that like I'm gonna hold on to this song. I remember playing it when I was in high school and people really liked it, and I've held on to it. And I never put anything out like officially, but it was I just felt like, okay, this fits the rest of what's going on here. The story behind it. So in my high school, they had this program where for the freshmen, it was like a team building camaraderie thing where in January, and this was in Miami, so it wasn't like super cold or anything. They would send out like the whole freshman class into the Florida Everglades, like into the swamp, basically, to go camping and canoeing with an Outward Bound program, which basically Outward Bound is like they have these leaders that like know how to survive in the wild, and everyone would go. And it's the kind of thing that I went to a school where a lot of people were very cynical about it. And I guess I was excited for it because I was like, yeah, outdoors, like why not? Like let's do this. And I ended up being one of the people that did love it and was like just canoeing my way through, had no problem with it. But the song that I wrote, like Into the Sun, right after the program, I wrote it, and I was trying to like encapsulate some of those feelings where like in the pre-chorus, I say, after this ends, you'll never speak to me again, which ended up not being entirely true. Like, sure, there were some people that, I didn't really keep too much in touch with after, but I would say like 90% of them, like a lot of friends, because I wasn't like a popular kid by any means. And I was with a group of kids that like at that time were like a big popular group. But I became like friends with them. And it was a lot less like of social boundaries because you're coming out of middle school and there's a lot more of that like infantile social hierarchy thing. And so I think I actually stand by the school's decision to do that program because it ended up being something that was really valuable. And at least I got the song out of it.
And I agree with that completely. I have those experiences with like when you mentioned that middle school hierarchy thing, that really came up back. Flooding memories came back. So I think it's very interesting that you put that song and showcase the outdoors. And like, believe me, I can break. Believe me, I remember one of my favorite things regarding outdoors was actually spending a full month. Crawling across the Pacific Northwest with Camp Shy way back in 2004.
Okay.
Traveling across Canada. So I know what your outdoor enthusiast is, but like living in tents for a month was like equivalent for me of 1 day equals 1 year.
Yeah, no, it's a while. That is a long time. It's definitely a lot more than a week.
But it's amazing how it's so that you were able to have that song and bring it from 15 you've been sitting on that for almost like 20, it feels like 15, 20 years, it feels like.
Yeah, like straight up 15 years, actually. Yeah, like actual 15 years.
It's amazing. Who knows what songs, like we all know about songs that have very longevity, but like nothing beats the power of a song and its message.
Yeah, I guess so. Hopefully people feel that it's, everyone, I think any artist would love to have a song that people could call timeless. I'm not saying that it's that, but at least it's the kind of thing where it still feels to me and to, I guess, people who are liking it that it could have been released now or it could have been released then.
Absolutely. So in February 2024, you released Afterall. So what have been some of the favorite memories recording this album? And why decide that now is the time to release your own music?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll start first by just talking about like a little bit about the process and then get into the memories. So obviously the EP is a process of several years because leading up, I was working with a lot of different artists and sort of trying to learn from them. And of course, Into the Sun is a 15-year-old song. But in the last year and a half is when I made a decision, because I was like, okay, I had put out like testing some small songs that I didn't really care too much about under like a moniker, so I could teach myself like, how does streaming work? How does like promoting stuff work? How does Spotify algorithm stuff work? And then, but I sat down with my friend Zachy Ali, who plays drums in Ethereus with me currently. We're both still in that band, and we were in Sonaro together, and we became really good friends. And I knew he was also a really good engineer and mixer and master of songs. And, you know, I had been around his studio when he was working with other people, and I knew a lot of other people that he worked with. And so I came to him and I was like, hey, I just want to start recording like a catalog of my music. And so I set a goal to like record just over like a year, maybe like as much of my catalog, my back catalog as I could. And in that span, I ended up writing a lot of new songs, with most of which are 5 of the 6 of the EP were actually new ones. So a lot of the older ones are still yet to be released, with the exception of Into the Sun. And so, yeah, it started off, we didn't have any like vision for like, oh, what is like the first EP going to be? I wanted to get this catalog together because I was thinking, look, if I have like 30 songs or something, maybe, you know, 20 to 40 songs as a catalog, and then I want to start, if I wanted to start pitching it to labels or to secure, you know, marketing relationships, I would be in a much better position to come in and be like, hey, I have this whole catalog of everything that's completely recorded, it's mixed and mastered. If you like it, then maybe we can work together, rather than show up and I have like 1 or 2 songs and people will be like, okay, this might be nice, but do we know if we can work with this person long term? What I've heard from a lot of my friends that have a lot of experience in the industry, whether they're managers or they're successful independent artists, is that it's important to give not just the impression, but with like proof of it, that you're an artist that is capable of creating a lot of music and keeping like a constant flow going. And so I thought it would just give me a lot more leverage and also comfort, because like I have the next 2 EPs like pretty much fully done. So it allows me now to really focus on, okay, like along with like marketing and promotion and like running ads on things and trying to grow, getting on playlists and whatnot. And it allows me to like focus a lot more on that and not be too distracted by like, oh, I got to write another song, and then feeling pressure. I can allow any new songs that do come up to be the result of inspiration, which for me has been like really, with the exception of just a couple examples, like I will not write music unless like I feel like I have to. Like if I'm dealing with something emotional, whether it's like a romantic situation, which tends to be the reason I write songs, or if it just tends to be like loss, like, you know, personal loss or anything. Most of the music I write is like a form of self-therapy. And so as far as like memories go, though, it was a huge advantage having Zachy. So his name is Zachy Ali. He's a really, really good multi-instrumentalist, plays a lot of things. He played drums on all the songs. And of course, he co-produced, and then he mixed and engineered and mastered the album, the EP. And just given the fact that we had spent so much time together as bandmates and just as friends, it allowed us to enter this like long recording process with a lot of comfort. And even though we hadn't recorded like one-on-one before, we were able to have the experience be like half as though we were just kind of hanging out and making music together, which made it easy. And then every song, like we started kind of just picking songs at random, like, okay, let's just start with this one. And then we'll get to the next one. And then some of the early ones, like we haven't even used, we might not even release. But with each song we did, it became a thing where it's like you get to know each other's way of thinking. The one person gets to know how someone likes things to sound. You get to know their process. You get to know how quickly they see through things, their strengths, and then they see your strengths. And then it eventually gets to a point like where we can knock out recording a song, depending on how complex it is. And sometimes it goes smoother than others because you might know what you want to do. You might not know. You just have the skeleton of the song. But over time, it became a thing where to now, Zachy and I, with very little verbal communication, we kind of just do things, and we have like a system now, and he'll know like how I like things to sound generally, and I know what he will do with certain things. So oftentimes, if it's something where like a treatment for the vocal, if we want to run like compression on it, EQ, and for processing guitars, he'll know what I like, so we can cue it up and save like 20 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot, but that adds up for like every little thing that you're going to do. And then we can just like crank them out, and, we don't have to say too much, but, especially just the fact that we're good friends, and, we're hanging out in the studio, we're having a good time. It's not like a stressful studio environment. So that's been a big advantage.
I gotta say, those are really good advantages. And besides, it reminds me so much of some other friends other musicians I've watched, and they are seeing them have fun in the studio. It's like that. It's incredible. When there's like, I can feel like with big record labels, it feels like when you have 20 people in the room or 25 people in the room, it's definitely stressful.
Sure. And I love any quote ever that I've heard from Rick Rubin, because he seems to always like just say the right thing. And I think like one thing, like for people in like big label situations, oftentimes they're given like the very, very little control over things. Depending on what kind of artists there are, because you have artists that are just performers and they'll be given songs, and they'll have people writing for them. But a lot of times, people who, there are some great examples of people I know, like Jewel, for instance, and who I love, and others that don't come to mind now. I know that like they had labels like really trying to tell them what to do with things, and I think Natasha Bedingfield as well. And then when she was able, with that big song of hers, I think Unwritten was the first like big smash hit of hers.
Absolutely love that song.
It's amazing. And that was like rejected by some of the label at first. They were like, we don't really like this. And she was able to then like just go out to LA and like just get with the right like co-producer and writer and do her own thing on it. And her sister was there. And it was when she was allowed to just kind of do her thing on it without having like people trying to come in and like armchair, produce the thing and write it. So yeah, I remember it was some sort of documentary I watched on, I don't know if it was Vice or Vox or something, that covered the making of that song. So for this, if you're an independent artist and you're working with someone that, you're a good friend of, and, you can just do your thing on, I think that is one huge advantage of that.
Absolutely. So who have been some of your favorite, who's on your list of dream collaborations?
Sorry, say it again, of what?
Dream collaborations, singers, songwriters, producers, and musicians.
Dream
who do you want to work with?
That's a good question. That's a good question. Put me on the spot on that. Well, I really have always loved Dave Matthews. I really, really love him. And actually, he's another great example of a really like suspiciously good guitar player when it comes to acoustic guitar players, because his guitar parts don't sound like they're particularly difficult. But when you sit down and learn them, you're like, whoa, some of these chords are like really hard to play. And especially to sing at the same time. I would definitely love to work with him. I love Thundercat so much. And he's the guy who inspired me to pick up a 6-string bass. And what's so interesting about 6-string bass is that you can play it like a guitar in terms of playing chords. And of course, his songwriting. Robert Glasper is my favorite jazz piano player. He would be a dream collaboration. And another artist is a local indie Brooklyn artist named Katie Glasgow. She has a band called Sally Hatchet right now. I just love her songwriting. It's really, really in like a similar style to mine, with its own kind of obviously its own spin on it. And she's a female vocalist, but she's an incredible songwriter. I really highly recommend anyone check out Katie Glasgow. She has this really nice, like slightly reminiscent of like the late 90s or mid 90s, but it has like a fresh sound. So I definitely would love to collaborate with her. But yeah, as far as like the big collaborators, if Chris Cornell was still around, and I would have to pass off the vocal duties to him, of course, because no one can really hang as a vocalist with Chris Cornell, except for Eddie Vedder, Temple of the Dog, of course, and some plenty of other people. But yeah, I'd say those two.
Really good answer. So Second to last question. Where social media, so 49,000 Instagram followers, which I gotta say, bravo.
No,
so what have been some of the methods that you've used to increase your followership on that platform?
Yeah, so now, I mean, Instagram is all about reels. They're kind of pushing reels, and that has sort of actually been a challenge because the algorithm now, a lot of people are talking about how unless you like create something that's exactly what they want, they'll kind of punish you for it. So it's been like really hit or miss. Sometimes I'll post one and it'll do like ridiculously well, and then sometimes I'll post one and it'll get like 20 likes or something, and like maybe like 900 views or something. But early on, it was mostly posting guitar videos, and it's not something I'm doing as much of lately because I want to focus on like the singer-songwriter thing. That was one thing. Running ads is effective, and it's the same thing as with driving traffic to Spotify. It is supposedly what I've heard from a lot of people who are watching the kind of trends and statistics in the industry, that the level of engagement you get in terms of people actually going to your song and saving it is a lot higher running targeted ads as opposed to having just a lot of playlist placement. You do want to have playlist placement as well. One thing I noticed though, and a lot of people that I've talked to as well, who were having a lot of success on Instagram, because most of my following was built up earlier. And it would get pushed out a lot more. And then after you reach a certain threshold, Instagram then starts like being a little bit more selective. But yeah, early on it was guitar stuff. And I think because I was playing in so many metal bands and playing a lot of just like shreddy guitar stuff, it was kind of what captivated that audience initially. And so I do want to still serve that audience. So I need to start putting that kind of stuff out more. But right now, since I am trying to promote this EP and shift to being a singer-songwriter, I've been mostly putting out that kind of content.
Awesome. So last question, are you ready?
Yep.
Where can they find your music, Ezra, and where can they connect with you on social?
Yes. So you can find my music on every distributor, right? Every marketplace, I don't know what you call it. So Spotify, and Apple and Deezer and Tidal and all of these. And of course, my name is Ezra Grey. As you can see, I don't know if they see it on the screen, but it's EZRAGREY. On Instagram, you can find me at Ezra Grey, just one word. I got lucky with that handle. I didn't get as lucky on the other ones. On Facebook, it's Ezra Grey Official. On YouTube, it's Ezra Grey Music. On TikTok, which I'm still trying to grow, it's Ezra Grey Music.
Wonderful. So guys, haven't missed an episode of the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar Podcast. Well, visit our channels on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Podchaser, Spotify, and Spreaker. Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. Now, are you on social media? Because I'm on social media too. Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. And if you want to find out more information about my take on new music, including my thoughts on Edward's new single, my thoughts on what's going on with The Masked Singer Season 10, and what I thought about AGT, visit jakes-shake.com. Once again, jakes-shake.com. Ezra, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jake.
And I cannot wait to listen to that EP in February. So, guys, thank you so much for your watching. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, have a great one, everybody. Goodbye.